Hari Om. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurme Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Our pranams to our Pujya Gurus, Adi Guru and the Guru Parampara. Team Vedanta welcomes you all. We are now into the sixth session. Hopefully, all of you are going through your Swamiji's PDFs or audios. One might ask, why are we struggling understanding the Purva Pakshi's questions and then the answers? They had not bothered us before this text. Swamiji says subconsciously because we are not able to swallow the idea that I am that infinite Brahman. These Shravanam texts like these will help us become established in our real nature, free from doubts. Our worldly vasanas will be replaced by spiritual vasanas. That freedom which is already ours will be recognized soon. The notion of infinitude, of finitude will drop. Today, we will first get a recap of last week's session by Srimati Chetna, followed by an introduction of today's verses by our teacher, Dr. Hegde. This will be then followed by presentations of all our speakers of the day. First, the recap. Over to you, Chetna ma'am.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. So in the last class, we saw Swami Vidyaranya address some doubts raised by the Purva Pakshi, one who represents all of us as he helps us to clarify our doubts. So what were his doubts? The first doubt was regarding the word I am, used in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 4.4.12. His question is, how can the word I am be used for Atma or Kutastha Chaitanya? Normally, the word I am, which means this, is used for something directly experienced in front of me, for something nearby, like a pot in front of my eyes. This is a pot. But Atma is not an object in front of me, directly experienced. So how can the word I am be used, was his question. So Swami Vidyaranya agrees that Atma is not an object, but it is the very subject and so is directly experienced all the time. But ignorance and avarna obstructs this fact. So the term I am can be used, he said. The next doubt raised is, if Kutastha Chaitanya is experienced all the time, then the matter of ignorance does not arise since it's known to me all the time. Then why do we need knowledge of the Atma since it is known all the time? Knowledge is required to remove ignorance. Since there's no ignorance, then attaining knowledge is not required. Another question he asks is, since Kutastha Chaitanya has ever experienced, it is neither remote nor a close-by object. So what is the use of Paroksha Jnanam, that is indirect knowledge, or Aparoksha Jnanam, or direct knowledge? So what is the need for Jnana or Jnana and Paroksha or Aparoksha Jnanam is a question raised by the Purva Pakshi. So Swami Vidyaranya uses the 10th man story to explain all these doubts. He says the Guru gives Paroksha knowledge, that is indirect knowledge, when he says the 10th man is there, Dashamaha Asti. And then by making him count again, he gives Aparoksha knowledge, direct knowledge, when he says you are the 10th man, Dashamaha Tvam Asi. He has gained Aparoksha knowledge of himself. He was already that, but was ignorant of the fact. Thus, he needs knowledge to remove this ignorance. To make it even clearer, Swami Vidyaranya, through the 10th man story, brings out the 7 stages in spiritual evolution. In the first stage, he calls it as Ajnana, or the ignorance phase, unexpressed ignorance. Just the 10 men are just relieved to have made it across the river. Not yet aware that if all have crossed the river, I don't know that I don't know. I am not aware of my true nature. Ignorance is bliss. And we have no idea of Brahman. This is the stage of ignorance. In the next stage, it is called as Avarna, or the veiling, as Swamiji calls it as expressed ignorance. They realize the 10th man is missing. In the same way, they have heard of Brahman, but does not know anything about it. Na bhati, na asti. I don't experience, and therefore it does not exist for me. This avarna leads to the next stage of vikshepa, where we start imagining and projecting our fears. Imagining the 10th man has drowned, how to face his family, and so on, thereby suffering. In the same way, we identify with the body-mind complex as our true self and suffer when affected. Stage 4 is Paroksha Jnanam or indirect knowledge, where the Guru says the 10th man is very much there. So everyone is relieved that he is not dead and is out there somewhere. Dashamaha Asti. So when the Guru tells us there is Brahman, we think Brahman is out there somewhere. This is indirect knowledge. Stage 5 is Aparoksha Jnanam or direct knowledge, where through a process, the Guru makes them realize that you are the 10th man. Dashamaha Tvam Asmi. In the same way, through various techniques or prakriyas, we realize Brahman is none other than me. Aham Brahma Asmi. Thereby gaining direct knowledge. The next two stages simultaneously follow once we realize our true nature. These are the benefits of knowing yourself. Stage 6 is Shoka Nivritti. Suffering disappears on realizing our true nature. This leads to the next stage of Tripti, of contentment or moksha. So in conclusion, Vedanta teaches us how to know God or our true self. When scriptures are ignored or misinterpreted, then we come to the wrong conclusions. These 7 stages that an individual goes through in his spiritual journey clearly tells us what stage we have passed through and where we are presently. So it is up to us to identify the stage we are in and progress further. Thank you. Hari Om.
Thank you, Chaitanya, for giving us a very crisp synopsis of the difficult verses that we studied in the last class. Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Sometimes we are faced with this question when somebody asks, do you believe in God? Especially when you ask a Vedanta Acharya, you expect a different kind of an answer. In Vedanta, the focus is not on belief, the focus is on knowledge. If you will go back to the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna begins with a promise right in the beginning of the 7th chapter where he says, I will clearly introduce you to yourself by giving a clear knowledge about my true nature. Shri Bhagavanu Achar. Maya Sakta Mana Partha Yogam Yunjam Madashraya Asamshaya Samagram Mam Yatad Jnashasi Tat Shrunu. Please listen. Listen to what? Mam Jnasyasi. You will come to know me samagram, completely, without any doubt, without asamshaya. So Krishna begins a new approach. That is why the 2nd Shatkams of the Bhagavad Gita focuses on Tat Padartha, or about the nature of God, and we have studied about the various nature of God. With that background, let us look and to see how we would address someone when they ask you about, do you believe in God? Vedantic teachers don't like the word belief. Belief comes wherever there is doubt. Now, if I know what day of the week it is today and I'm certain about it, I will not say I believe today is a Saturday, because I know it is Saturday. When I know what day it is, it will not come under the domain of belief. Now, when do we have belief? Whenever something is paroksha, something is very distant, and I don't have a proper knowledge about it. But once I have a proper knowledge, then God will not be a matter of belief, but will be a matter of knowing. Now, whenever we use the word deva is used in our scriptures very loosely for a number of things. And therefore, you have to see the meaning of the word deva, which usually means a divine or a heavenly being. All heavenly beings are called devas in contrast to asuras. Then there are some important devas, like when you go to the Navagraha, Suryaya, Chandraya, Mangala. Now, these are all devas who have certain responsibilities. They are the ones who support God in all these functions. Now, in Sanskrit, the word deva also means sense organs, mind, or anything that helps us to know. If I use my eyes to see the world around me, my eyes are also called devas. Now, if all of them are devas, who is Mahadeva? Mahadeva should be that enlivening consciousness principle which makes my mind alive, which makes my consciousness alive. And whenever you refer to the principal God, you also refer to as Mahadeva. In Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, if you want to refer to God, the good word is Ishvara. Ishvara represents the totality. That means when the original consciousness, Atma or Brahman, falls on Maya, the samashti, the total, that combination of Maya and Brahman becomes Ishvara. And this is the God that we pray to in all our main temples. God who is the creator, who is the sustainer, to whom we resolve to. In Vedanta, we speak about Brahman. Now, Brahman is different from Ishvara. Brahman represents that conscious enlivening principle, which we also known as Satchit Ananta. When you refer to Ishvara, we talk of Brahman plus Maya. When we refer to the individual, we speak of Atma and Avidya, that combination. And if you look at the essential nature of Atma or Brahman, it is just like the essential nature of the wave is water. The essential nature of the ocean is also water. The wave can never be equated to the ocean. The jiva can never be equated to Ishvara. But the water in the wave and the water in the ocean are one and the same. And whenever you say Jivatma, Paramatma, Aikyam, you are identifying with your essential nature, which is actually more important because that is the greater reality, because the Jiva and Ishvara come under a lower order of reality. Now let us be very clear, and therefore, when somebody asks you, do you believe in God? Your answer would be, more than believe, I know. Because now I have Shraddha, and now I know exactly what I am talking about. Coming to our topic for today, Namashri Shankarananda Guru Padambu Janmane Savilasa Mahamoha Graha Grasaika Karmane. The entire Tripti Deepa is a PhD level evaluation analysis of this Brihadaranyaka mantra, Atmanam Ched Vijaniyat Ayam Asmiti Purushaha Kimichan Kasya Kamaya Shariram Anuswam Jared. Before we go into the 10 verses that we are going to, 10 selected verses of today's classes, I will touch on a few points, which Swamiji emphasizes as very important. First, we get Brahma Asti knowledge through Shravanam. What about Brahma Asmi? You remember our whole journey is from Asti, Brahman exists, 4th stage, to the 5th stage, Brahma Asmi. Do we get this knowledge during Shravanam, during Mananam, or during Nidityasan? Vidyaranya makes it very clear about the importance of Shravanam. In Shravanam, he includes Mananam as an integral part. That means when the spiritual knowledge dawns very clearly, that alone is important. Nidityasanam does not give any newer knowledge. Nidityasanam is to remove various obstacles in the knowledge which will be analyzed later. Important among them is called the Viparita Bhavana. When somebody tells you, you are infinite. But we see ourselves as limitations, and because of all these limitations, we are not able to experience or have the fruit of Brahma Vidya. But then if we are good listeners, that is why these satsangs and these classes and listening to Swamiji is so important, because just by listening to our true nature, we get our wisdom. The other important thing that Swamiji talks again and again is the state of my body or the state of my mind. And I know my body has various problems. My mind has more problems. Has nothing to do with my freedom, with my Purnatva. We need to work on it, but these are two independent things. The second important thing I want to touch is, and this is a Purva Pakshi question that came, which was not addressed. Now, Brahman is Sat, Chit and Ananda. Does Brahman have parts? Vidyaranya Swami says, from a Paramarthika angle, Brahman does not have any parts. But we are seeing Brahman from a Vyavahara angle. In Vyavahara, we see that the whole world is Mithya. And in contrast to Mithya, Brahman is Sat. We see that the whole world is inert, Jada. In contrast to that, Brahman is consciousness. We see Dukkha, and in contrast, Brahman is Ananda. So in relation to the world, we see three aspects, although Brahman is not divided into Sat, Chit or Ananda. Now we come to today's class, and it will be touched in the last class, and very important, I want as a speakers touch upon what are the two types of avarana. Our entire class today is going to be about the two types of avarana. One is called Sattva avarana. Sattva avarana is when we are not aware of the existence of Brahman. We do not even know Brahman exists. Through Paroksha Jnanam, this is the third person knowledge. When the teacher comes and tells you that the 10th man exists, then we get to know something called Brahman, or whatever I'm looking for is there, but I do not know who that person is. We know as somebody there, out there. That is the third person knowledge. But any amount of indirect knowledge or third person knowledge does not help you. The teacher goes through a certain technique to bring about what is called Bhana Avarana. Sat Avarana means the Maya Shakti has the ability to conceal the existence of Brahman, the manifestation of Brahman. When the Avarana blocks the manifestation of Brahman, what do I say? I understand that Brahman exists, but I do not experience that Brahman. Now, Guru points out, you are that. By you means not this body, not the mind, but the consciousness in all of us is what is Brahman. Now, these words of the Vedanta are not words of information, but they are words of introduction. They help you to know who you truly are. Toward the end of today's class, you will see there are two types of aparokshatvam. Aparokshatvam is first person knowledge. I am that. Now, the 10th person was always the 10th person, even before the teacher said, Tattvamasi, you are the 10th man. That knowledge is called natural aparoksha. Natural aparokshatvam does not give us freedom. But when the teacher tries to help you to understand you are that, that is called understood aparokshatvam or aparoksha jnanam. That is the one that gives us freedom. That is what we are working for. There is one term again and again coming. What is Kutastha? Kutastha means Kutastha Chaitanya, the original consciousness of Brahman. The other term that comes is Chidabhasa. When the original consciousness reflects out of us, the reflected consciousness is called Chidabhasa by Vidyaranya, which is also called the Pratibimba Chaitanya. As you see in this picture, when the original consciousness falls on Maya, the original consciousness and Maya manifest as Ishvara. When the same original consciousness falls on us, what reflects out is the jiva or the individual. With this background, let us listen to our opening speaker, Venkatesh Prasad. Venkatesh, please.
Thank you, sir. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. The subject matter of entire 7th chapter called Tripti Deepa is one mantra from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Swami Vidyaranya begins this chapter with that mantra 4.4.12, and the following 297 shlokas revolve around this shloka, which says, Chet Purushaha Atmanam Ayamasmi iti Vijaniyat Kimichan Kasya Kamaya Shariram Anusamjvaret. The study of this chapter, Tripti Deepa, is the process of that realization. A journey from Brahma Asti to Aham Brahma Asmi, passing through 7 stages from Ajnana to Tripti, using the example of 10th man story. Next slide, sir. We have traveled 36 shlokas in our quest for this self-realization. We heard about the first 2 avasthas, Ajnana and Avarana, in shloka 35 and 36, presented by Srimati Rama Madam in the previous session. Let's go to the third avastha, that is Vikshepa, in shloka 37, which reads as under. Dehadvaya chidabhasa rupo vikshepa iritaha. Kartrutvad yakhilaha shokaha samsarakyo asya bandhaka. Swami Vidyaranya discusses the 7 avasthas 3 times, and this is the 3rd time. And he is discussing vikshepa for the 2nd time, but chooses to deviate slightly in its definition. Next slide, sir. Way back in Shloka 30, he had defined this vikshepa as karta bhokta ahamasmi iti vikshepam pratipadyate. Here in 2nd line of verse 7.37, he says, Kartritvadi akilaha shokaha bandhakaha samsarakya vikshepa. Vidyaranya uses the word Kartritvadi, all the struggles in the form of kartavya, like I am karta, I am bhokta, etc. Once kartritva comes, bhoktritva follows, and jiva enters all the struggles. Kartritva is a pain in the form of duties, and bhoktritva is in the form of dukkha anubhava. And this shoka is the shackle or bondage for the jiva, and it is known by the name samsara. This karta bhokta is the 3rd stage, vikshepa. Until here, there is no problem, as both definitions are on the same lines. Next slide, sir. But in the 1st line, Vidyaranya says the 2 bodies, the physical and subtle, Chidabhasa, the reflected consciousness, and the reflected medium also falls under vikshepa only. Dehadvaya sahita chidabhasa rupa vikshepa iritaha. Because they are mithya, Vidyaranya includes them in the vikshepa. It is the projection caused by ajnana. When the world is caused by ajnana, what to talk of body, mind, and the reflected consciousness? They are also vikshepa only. This addition creates a problem. Purvapakshi is waiting to attack. In Shloka 38 to 43, Vidyaranya Swami brilliantly answers all the questions raised by Purvapakshi, whether it is about correctness of Chidabhasa, owning of the first 2 avasthas, ownership of Ajnana, is it Chit or is it Jiva, and so many others. Next slide, sir. That brings us to Shloka 44, which will take us to next 2 avasthas, Paroksha Gnana and Aparoksha Gnana. Jnanadvayena nashtesmin ajnane tatkritavruti nabhati nasti chetyesha dvividyapi vinashyati. Until now, Vidyaranya has pointed out that the first 3 avasthas fall under bandhaka avastha and belong to jiva only. Hereafter, he wants to show the last 4 put together are called moksha avastha. They are paroksha gnana, aparoksha gnana, shoka nivritti, and tripti. Paroksha gnana and aparoksha gnana, the 4th and 5th stages, have got 2-fold functions. Next slide, sir. Previously, while talking about the 2nd stage, he mentioned that avarana is 2-fold. One is Brahman is non-existence, since the existence of Brahman is concealed, which is sattva avarana. Brahman may be in existence, but Brahman is not existent for me, and this concealment of experience of Brahman is called bhana avarana. Next slide, sir. He says, Paroksha Gnana removes sattva avarana. There is Brahman, Brahma asti is Paroksha Gnana. The scriptures tell me that Brahman is there, so I know Brahman is there. I will never say Brahman is non-existent. The non-existent part is negated by the Paroksha Gnana. Then the Jiva says, I know Brahman, but I have no Brahman. Now that experience is covered, he says that covering of Brahman experience is called Bhana Avarana. This Avarana goes by Aparoksha, that is, I am Brahman, Aham Brahma Asmi. Sattva Avarana says Brahman is not there, and Bhana Avarana says Brahman experience is not there. Both of them go away on gaining self-knowledge. That is the benefit of 4th and 5th state of Paroksha Gnana and Aparoksha Gnana. All these come under Moksha Avasthas. Dr. Divakar is going to elaborate on this. Hari Om. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sri Venkatesh Prasad, for a very nice explanation of verses 37 to 44, in which the verse 37 talked about the 3rd stage, when I do not know my true nature and I have a projection of limitation. Remember that Hridaya Granthi Avidya Kama Karma. And the moment there is karma, There is kartrutvam, bhoktritvam, and most of us are suffering in stage 3. But because of the Guru, we come to stage 4, where we know that Brahman exists. And our whole journey is from stage 4 to stage 5, where when I know Brahman exists, it is not going to make a great difference to me. It is like a third person knowledge. But when that knowledge, that one that I'm looking for, that limitless, all-pervading consciousness, that is my true nature. If that becomes open to me, then I will get aparoksha jnanam. And that is what the whole exercise of Tripti Deepa, which will be deepened in the next set of verses, which will be explained by Dr. Devakar. Dr. Devakar, please.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Study of Tripti Deepa of Pancadashi alone is more than sufficient to dispel any doubts on Atmagnanam. Thanks to the systematic teachings by Swami Vidyaranya. Deepest reverence to all the gurus who make this advanced text a lot more simpler for our easy assimilation. In the 7 stages of spiritual evolution that we have already seen, the first 3, Ajnana, Avarana, and Vikshepa, are called as Bandha Hetu, or causes for bondage. The second 2, Paroksha Jnanam and Aparoksha Jnanam, are called Moksha Hetu, or the means for liberation. And the last 2, Shoka Nivritti and Tripti, are the phalam, or the final outcome of the spiritual journey. Let's see Bandha Hetu quickly. Ajnanam, Avarana, and Vikshepa. We know that all 3 are interrelated terms. Ajnanam is self-ignorance, and it is also called as avidya. Taking from Tattva Bodha, we know that avidya is represented by Karana Sharira, causal body. Avidya is the Maya at the individual level. At the cosmic level, it is Maya, and at the Jiva level, it is avidya or Ajnanam. We know that avidya or Maya has 2 natures or traits. They are Avarana, the veiling power, and Vikshepa, the projecting power. So Ajnanam or avidya is equal to Avaranam plus Vikshepa. If avidya is the whole coin, Avarana is one side or one face of it, and Vikshepa is the other face of the same coin. Avidya or Ajnana, because of its Avarana Shakti, covers our true nature, which is the all-pervading sentient Atma, which is referred to as Kutastha in this chapter. This Avarana is of 2 types. First is the covering of the Asti aspect of the Brahman. In other words, even the knowledge of existence of Brahman is not there. So an Ajnani will say Brahman doesn't exist. Brahman na asti, Brahman nasti. This is also called as Sattva Avarana. Then the second aspect of Avarana is Nabhati or Abhana, meaning the experiential aspect of Brahman is covered. This is the inability to appreciate the awareness principle in every experience. We know that Atma or Brahman is not an object of experience, but is the very experiencer, the subject. Every experience is only because of Brahman. We can already see that Nabhati or Bhana Avarana, the inability to experience the awareness aspect of the Brahman, is more subtler and a difficult aspect to grasp. This is a challenge, particularly for the beginners in the Vedantic study. It is relatively easy to dispel the na asti of Avarana, as Shravanam and Mananam of Shastras through Guru helps us to know this knowledge, and this is called as Atmagnanam. But Nabhati of Avaranam needs individual effort, assimilation and contemplation of the learned knowledge from Shravanam and Mananam. This assimilation is called as Nididhyasanam. This is the journey from Brahman Asti to Brahman Asmi. What about Vikshepa, which is the projection or sometimes called as Adhyasa or superimposition? This is a result of Avaranam itself. Taking the rope and snake example, not having a knowledge of rope is Ajnana, then misinterpreting the rope as a snake is Avarana. In other words, we have superimposed the snake on the rope which is avarana, and then getting anxious and worried about the perceived snake and suffering is vikshepa. Like the non-recognition of the rope is leading to the snake superimposition and suffering. The non-recognition of Kutastha Atma will lead to the false identification with superimposed body-mind, and that will lead to the effect called as samsara. As seen in the previous verse, Jnanadvayam, twofold knowledge is required to destroy two kinds of avarana. This twofold knowledge removes na asti and na bhati aspect of avarana. Then what about the vikshepa? Vikshepa will automatically dissolve as soon as the avaranam is destroyed. Just like on realizing that it is a rope, avarana of the snake is gone, and with that, even the vikshepa and the anxiety about the snake is also gone. Verse 45, Paroksha Gnanato Nashyet Asatva Vritti Hetuta, Aparoksha Gnananashahya Abhana Vritti Hetuta. First of the Gnana Dvaya is Paroksha Gnana, which is the indirect knowledge. This is the Atma Gnana that we get from Shastras and the Guru through satsangs like this one. This Paroksha Gnanam removes the first stage of Avarana, which is Brahman na Asti, which is also called as Sattva Avarana, meaning we understand that Brahman Asti. So we begin to accept the Sat, the pure existence principle or the isness principle. It's worth repeating that Sat, Chit, and Ananda are synonyms of Brahman or Atma. How do we know that Sat exists? Because Shastras, which are authoritative, makes it abundantly clear. And we use Shastra Pramana for our self-knowledge. Until this, most of the spiritual seekers are very comfortable with. Then the second line, Aparoksha Gnana Nashya Abhana Vritti. Abhana is the second type of avarana, which means the Atma doesn't appear. Abhana Nashya is the removal of the notion that Atma doesn't appear. Aparoksha Gnana, the direct knowledge, destroys this second aspect of avarana, which is Bhana Avrutti or Nabhati. In the first step, through Paroksha Gnanam, the covering of the Atma's existence is removed. The superimposition of our body-mind on Atma is understood, and we can accept that Atma or Brahman is Asti, it is existing. And in the second step, through the Aparoksha Gnanam, the direct knowledge, we claim that that Brahman which is existing is none other than me, myself. So this is the personal discovery that I am that Atma which is superimposed by the body-mind. Through the contemplative inquiry, this is the identification with our true nature or Brahman, who is the original experiencer behind every experience of ours. This is Aparoksha Gnana, which removes the subtlest Nabhati of Avarana. This is the Asti to Asmi. So verses 44 and 45 completes the discussion of Paroksha and Aparoksha Gnana, which is the Moksha Hetu. In verse 46, Abhana Varane Nashte Jivatva Rupa Sankshayat Kartutva Dvayakilah Shokaha Samsarakyo Nivartate. For the Vedantic information to become a life-changing transformation, what we need is to work on is not the removal of the Vikshepa. It's not the removal of the first layer of Sattva Avarana, but it is a second and the subtlest layer of Avarana, which is Bhana Avarana. Removal of the notion that Atma doesn't appear. It can't be appreciated in our experience. With Abhana Varane Nashte, with Aparoksha Gnanam, the direct claim of Atma as I am that at all times through all of our experiences, and which is quoted in the Upanishads as Pratibodha Viditam Matam. I, the experiencer, is there in every experience, at every breath, at every blink of our eyelid, etc. This is the first person knowledge. If Atma is indirect knowledge, it is learned as a subject, it is learned as it, as if it is the second person or the third person knowledge. It will still be academic and bookish knowledge if it is an indirect knowledge. As we get stuck at Shravanam and Mananam aspect. At this level, our emotional control will limit to the time we spend in the satsangs or during some of the meditative practices. The moment we face the situations which stir up our emotions, like for example in the traffic or because of interpersonal issues in the family, etc., we react back with the emotions of anger, anxiety, and depression based on our preconditioned temperaments. Paroksha Gnanam gives temporary ananda, like material pleasures, Vishyananda. Only when this Paroksha Gnanam becomes Aparoksha, then body-mind identification drops, and with that, the Vikshepa of the doership, Kartatva Bhava, and the receivership, Bhoktatva Bhava, and even the knowership, Gnatatva Bhava, which belongs to the body-mind, will also be dropped instantly. Jivatva Aropa Sankshaya. Aparoksha Gnanam removes the false identification of the lower body and the mind. And in summary, Paroksha Gnana removes Brahman Nasti Avarana. We accept that Brahman exists. With contemplative self-inquiry of Aparoksha Gnana, we claim that Brahman is Aham. Aham Brahman Asmi. This removes Abhana Avarana. With this, the superimposition of Jivatva is removed, and therefore automatically the Vikshepa is also gone, meaning all the belongings of the body mind, which is Kartatva, Bhoktatva, and Gnatatva, is dropped. With this, the samsara is gone. All the sufferings are definitely avoidable and unnecessary. We realize that the snake was never there on switching on the light. So what we need to do is what we need to have is a constant illumination from Aparoksha Gnanam to realize that the snake of samsara is an illusion. Hari Om. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Divakar. That was another wonderful explanation of a difficult set of verses where we are working on that indirect knowledge, or as was already explained by Venkatesh Prasad, destroys Brahma Asti, Avarana of Brahman Asti, whereas the direct knowledge gives us Brahma Asmi, the experience of Brahman. And once all these coverings are removed, all our sufferings also will automatically disappear. The sense of jivatvam, the sense of limitation, goes away. The next two set of verses will be explained to us by Aruna. Aruna, please.
Hari Om, Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. With this verse 47, we come to the final stage in the 7 stages of moksha. So this may be described as the moksha avastha. This is the phalam. So let us look at this verse. Nivritte sarva samsare nitya muktatva bhasanat nirankusha bhave triptihi punah shoka samudbhavat. Nivritte sarva samsare. In the 6th stage, all the samsaras are eliminated or overcome. Therefore, nivritte samsare, sarva samsare, that is all worldly suffering caused by samsara, come to an end. And how does this happen? By bhasanat, by the discovery or the revelation, muktatva, or the total freedom, the state of liberation from all bondage, and this is where it happens. Swami Paramarthananda goes to great depths to explain the state of muktatva as being one claimed. It is not an acquired stage where somebody becomes something, but he says it is revealed or claimed because it actually is always there. The Atman is always limited and free, but what prevents this discovery is ignorance and misconception. In the story of the 10th man, the Dashama was always there, ever present. There was never anyone lost. Similarly, with Aparoksha Jnana, removal of ignorance, one discovers that what we already are that which we wish to possess and become. Bhasanat, it's ever evident. Therefore, a person can claim moksha. So with this moksha, next slide, please. With this moksha comes Nirankusha Tripti, eternal Ananda. Swamiji says that this is your original nature and it is not acquired. And this type of Ananda is not an experiential pleasure like other pleasures, like maybe drinking a cup of hot tea on a rainy day. But this experience belongs to Anandamaya Kosha. But this Tripti is permanent. It is Atmananda. It is Jnanananda. And it is there always. And because of this, the Nirankusha Bhava will never go away. The state of being in a state of bliss will never go away. And mental conditions cannot disturb the state of Tripti Ananda. And Atmananda cannot be disturbed by any of our mental states. Punah Shoka, therefore, there will never be a state of sorrow, and sorrows and mental conditions will never disturb the state of Ananda Swarupa. This is Nirankusha Ananda, total Ananda, irrespective of Ananda, of the Anandamaya Kosha. So we are already that which we are seeking. We now come to verse 49. Ayamitvam parokshatvam muktam tadvividha bhavet vishayasva prakashatva dhiyapyevam tadikshanat. So from this previous verse 48 and from 49 onwards, Vidyaranya Swamiji gives us a very detailed description of aparoksha jnanam. The transition from fourth to fifth, or the paroksha to aparoksha jnanam, is a very, very critical one. That is the crux of the whole thing. Aparoksha jnanam is in the fifth stage and leads to the sixth stage, which is shoka nivritti, and then leads finally to liberation. So Vidyaranya Swamiji, focusing on aparoksha jnanam, divides this into two types. Now remember, the word I am used in this verse refers to Kutastha Atma or Brahman and its direct experience as enunciated in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So let us now look at the two types of aparoksha jnanam. One, actual directness or aparokshatva, because of the inherent nature of Brahman, its very nature, that is what it is. The second type is the understood directness of Brahman, which is understood by the intellect and the mind. Next slide, please. So let us look at the first type of aparoksha jnanam, that is the self-evident one. This jnanam is always there. Brahman is ever present, immediate, and self-evident. This I am, not that. It, Vishaya or Brahman, never ceases to be. That is its inherent nature, Swaprakasha. Brahman is self-luminous. We require a light to see a pot, but the light itself requires no light to illuminate itself. Similarly, Brahman is like that, self-luminous. Going back to the 10th man story, the 10th man or Dashama was always there. He didn't suddenly appear from somewhere. Therefore, this aparokshatva or directness was always there, but due to ignorance or misconception, it gets covered in parokshatva or indirect knowledge, where the person in the story actually went searching for the 10th man. Actually, in paroksha jnanam, aparokshatva is there, but it is not understood. Paroksha is superimposed on direct knowledge on aparokshatva. Next slide, please. Now let us look at the second type of aparoksha jnanam. This is the understood aparokshatva, understood by the mind and the intellect. After the Guru imparts his Mahavakya Updesh, Tattvam Asi, the mind and intellect understand the aparokshatva. Dhiya api tadikshanat, dhiya, with the mind, tadikshanat, one understands that I am or Brahman is self-revealing knowledge of consciousness. The knowledge that self-revealing consciousness is here and I am that, because the Guru has said Tattvamasi. This is the understood aparoksha jnana. Actual aparokshatva gets converted into understood aparokshatva, because once the Guru tells the 10th man that you are that, he has understood. So that is the understood aparokshatva. This type of aparokshatva, the understood one, is the one that leads to liberation. So one goes from Brahman Asti to Brahman Asmi. Thank you very much. Hari Om.
Thank you very much, Aruna, for a nice explanation of two important verses, 47 and 49. One word that you need to focus in 47 is Nirankusha. Nirankusha means any form of limitations, free from all forms of limitations. What is that which causes limitations? Our upadhi. Our upadhi means for us the body-mind. When does the body-mind come into being? The moment we wake up. When we are fast asleep, we are in a state of Nirankusha. We experience no forms of limitations. But when we wake up, we experience limitations. But however, through Brahma Vidya, when we move from that state of aparoksha jnanam, then you will realize this body-mind is mithya. And therefore, even though I experience this body-mind, the limitations of my body-mind are not my limitations. Aruna also very clearly explained the distinction between the natural aparokshatva. The 10th man was always the 10th man, but real freedom in our lives come when you understand you are that, and that is when the Mahavakya makes its real impact to us. Verse 50 and 51 will be explained to us by Dr. Ambika. Dr. Ambika, please.
Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. The verse 50 talks about the self-humanist nature of Brahman that exists during the Paroksha Jnana as well as the time of Aparoksha Jnana. And the 51 talks about whether Paroksha Jnana we considered as a knowledge or a misconception. Next slide, sir. The Paroksha Jnana is the fourth stage when we listen about the definition of Brahman as Satya Jnana Ananta. When we listen about Brahman, it is Avantara Jnana, and this Jnana is known as Paroksha Jnana. Next slide, sir. The Paroksha Jnana means remoteness. It's a Swabhavik Aparokshatva. It's Vishaya Prakasha. It's concealed. And Aparoksha means recognized. When it is recognized after Mahavakya is being introduced. It's Jnata Aparokshatva. So in context to Brahman, what we mean by the Parokshatva and Aparokshatva Jnana, the directness to Brahman is of two types. One is the natural proximity to the Brahman. The Brahman is proximate to all, it being all pervading. It's being my very Swarupa. This is type of known as the Aparokshatvam, natural Aparokshatvam, which is being expressed by Vishayas of Prakasha. The second type is known as Aparokshatvam, which is recognized. Only after the introduction of Mahavakya, the Paroksha Jnana becomes the Aparoksha Jnana. The Brahman has vivid Aparokshatvam. When we say Brahman is Jagat Karanam, he is directly available, but it is not recognized. It is concealed. Only when the Mahavakya is being introduced by a guru, the Paroksha Jnana becomes the Aparoksha Jnana. Next slide, sir. So we can understand from an example, the breathing, which is very natural to us. We are doing it since our birth, but we are not aware of it. Under the teacher's instruction and the practice, the same breathing becomes a conscious breathing, and when we go to the meditative state. Similarly, the Paroksha Jnana becomes a Paroksha Jnana by the introduction of Mahavakya by a guru. The journey from Brahman Asti to Brahman Asmi. Next slide, sir. Now the question comes, is the Paroksha Jnana a misconception? A person in a Paroksha Jnana does not refer to Brahman as Aham, but he says there is Jagat Karanam Brahman. Brahman is the cause of this universe. The Brahman is there. Though it's in the indirect knowledge. He is not getting associated with knowledge. The Brahman is not negated at any point of time. We are not saying the Brahman is Nasti. The Brahman is always there. The Brahman is Asti. Unlike in the example of snake and rope, the snake was there. But when the knowledge lights falls upon it, it disappears and the rope came. There, it is a misconception. But in the case of Brahman, whether it's a Paroksha Jnana or Araksha Jnana, the Brahman is there and it is a true knowledge.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ambika, for a nice explanation of these two verses, where you have our whole journey is that from Brahma Asti, existence of Brahman, which I know as a third person knowledge, to Brahma Asmi through the understanding of the Mahavakya. Again, a Purva Pakshi comes and says, you initially got the knowledge of Brahma Asti, and then you moved on to Brahma Asmi. And therefore, that indirect knowledge is erroneous. Vidyaranya says, and he gives more reasons to be able to say, unlike the rope snake example where the initial experience was negated by throwing a light, this is not so. Brahman is there in the first stage of knowledge, and the next stage of knowledge is the understanding that Brahman, which I thought was Satyam, Dhyanam, Anantam, is none other than my true nature. We come to the last presentation for today, verses 57 and 58, which will be explained to us by Panaga. Panaga, please.
Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Dashamaha Asti iti vibhrantam paroksha gnanam ikshyate. Brahma asti iti api tadvad syat agnana avaranam samam. We now know that the knowledge that Dashamaha Asti is Paroksha Gnana or indirect knowledge to the 10th man, because it is given by a third person. This knowledge, this indirect knowledge was necessary because even though the 10th man was always there, the directness of his existence was concealed because of ignorance. This had caused fear among the entire group, Vibhrantam. Similarly, our perception of the world is flawed, causing suffering. We need a guru to reveal the existence of the all-pervading, eternal, unchanging substratum, that Brahma Asti and Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Our perception of the world with all its Nama Rupa is of a lower order of reality than our true existence. This indirect knowledge or Paroksha Gnana removes the Sat Avarana of Brahman. Next slide, sir. In the next verse, Atma Brahmeti Vakyarthe Nisheshena Vicharite Vyaktirullikhyate Tadvat Dashamaha Tvam Asi Iti Ataha. With Paroksha Gnana, we know that Brahma Asti, but we do not know that that Brahma is me, Brahma Asmi. When Paroksha Gnana is elevated to Aparoksha Gnana, then the general knowledge of Brahman's existence is converted into specific knowledge that the same all-pervading Brahman exists as me, the ever-experienced witness consciousness. This particularized or personified knowledge of the identification of Brahman as myself is called Vyaktirullikhyate. This is established logically and without doubt, Nisheshena, by Mahavakya Vichara, stated in this verse as Atma Brahma Iti Vakyarthe. Vakya here refers to Mahavakya. This Aparoksha Gnana removes Chit Avarana. I, the Jiva, am now conscious that Aham Brahma Asmi. Next slide, sir. Vidyaranya Swami says that it is only through Vedanta Shravana that I learn that I am the ever-evident, ever-free consciousness. There is a misconception that during Shravana we get indirect knowledge of Brahman, and during Nididhyasana or meditation we gain direct experience of Brahman. Vidyaranya Swami negates this and says both indirect and direct knowledge have to take place in Shravana only. The 10th man needed to be told that the 10th man exists, Dashama Asti. Next, he needed to be told that Dashamaha Tvam Asi. Similarly, in the case of Brahman, we need to practice Shravana, specifically Mahavakya Shravana, to gain the knowledge that Brahma Asti and that Tvam Asi. and then we can claim that Aham Brahmasmi. Therefore, we should not practice meditation in the hope of some mystical Brahma Anubhava, because Brahman is not a foreign entity to be gained, but is always existent within me as the witness consciousness. I only have to remove my ignorance through Mahavakya Shravanam and claim this knowledge at every possible moment. Next slide, sir. To summarize, Paroksha Gnana removes Sat Avarana, the concealment of the existence of Brahman, and Aparoksha Gnana removes Chit Avarana, that I am that Brahman, the pure consciousness. To put it simply, we can know the existence of something indirectly, but consciousness is always direct. I can never be indirectly conscious of anything. Therefore, after Aparoksha Gnana, I know that Brahman is always experienced as the witness consciousness, Aham. I am. Also, let us remember that Sat and Chit are not two parts of Brahman, but they are necessary from our limited worldview. From the point of view of this changing, perishable Mithya world, Brahman is Sat, eternally, independently, unchanging existence. From the point of view of this insentient matter that makes up this Jada Jagat, Brahman is Chit, pure consciousness. These seemingly two separate parts can be compared to day and night as viewed from the earth. But when viewed from the sun, there is no day or night. Just like that, Brahman is Ekam and Advitiyam. Finally, Vedanta Shravana is absolutely necessary for both Paroksha and Aparoksha Gnanam. Nididhyasana must be practiced to assimilate and claim the Mahavakya Vichara, Aham Brahmasmi, and eliminate Viparita Bhavana. Thank you, Hari Om.
Thank you very much, Panaga, and thanks to all our speakers. You know, whenever you try to explain these very subtle Vedantic ideas in our journey from Brahma Asti, existence of Brahman, to Brahma Asmi, Vidyaranya is trying to very logically help us to be convinced of our true nature and all that we need to know, what we normally take for us for granted. Like Dr. Ambika gave us the example of breathing. Breathing we take for granted. But the moment we become aware of our breathing, we get into a greater dimension of awareness. In the last talk, very nicely brought out by Panaga, was the fact of I am. Who can say I? Only a conscious person can say I. When I say I am, it means I am existent. And when you really look at this, when you say I, then the avarana of bhana is taken off. You know that you are conscious. And when you say you am, the avarana or the concealment of existence is taken off. And that is our whole journey, to be able to understand who this I am is. We will conclude this class. Neeta, please.
Thank you, Dr. Hegde, and thank you to all the speakers for giving it to us on a platter. Huge learnings, but we have to go back to the study table and recap these learnings for ourselves. Only 100 verses will be taken up during these sessions out of the 298. So be assured that if we go back and we do our self-study, this hard work will pay off. This is the best sadhana we can do right now at this stage. Aikyam must be clearly understood. Problems of the mind like raga, dvesha can be handled separately. The complete should be known completely. For better understanding of this text, we must get familiar with the terms kutastha, chidabhasa, parokshanyanam, aparokshanyanam, bhana avarna, sattva avarna, mahavakyam, avarantara vakyam, and so many more words. Let's get familiar with that. Let's get familiar with the 10th man story. which helps us in comparing to our spiritual journey from ignorance to self-realization. We meet for our next session, session 7 of Pancadashi, which will be premiered on 21st August. Thank you. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om.